You got one life, for crying out loud. You might as well just give it all you got.
The Deej, Dan Jordan.
Your daily dose of reality. Your daily dose of the Deej.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I need my daily dose of the Deej.
I make the news. I don't watch the news. I'm a leader.
The Sales Energizer, Dan Jordan.
Listen, don't worry how to sell, baby. Worry about why people buy. And it's fun.
You don't need a 5-hour energy. All you need is the Sales Energizer.
Just when I think it's not going to be as fun as the one before, each one gets successfully better. What's the word I'm looking for? What's it going to take to get you into this car today, huh?
And now, please welcome the Sales Energizer, Dan Jordan.
Boom! That's exactly it. Do that. Let's do that. It's so much better, Chris Stone. That's awesome.
And I didn't make you hold your arms up too long.
I know.
You know?
Though I actually was nervous. What if I didn't keep it up long enough? What if I approached you with my arms not up?
Well, you can even as a seasoned veteran like you has admitted to me before, the light goes red or before you're backstage, you're ready to go on or you're ready to talk in front of, thousands of people, you still get some butterflies, right? You still get a little of that going on. It's
it's true. I heard once that Elvis used to get nervous too. I figure if Elvis gets nervous, I get nervous. But here's the thing, and this has always been, this is on sales calls or this is when you go on stage. And I've spoken in front of thousands. By the way, my smallest audience was one. It was just a nightmare. Nobody showed up, one person. It was more of a meeting. It was just terrible. It was terrible. But so you go up, you get nervous. But here's the thing. While I'm sitting there like off to the side, and perhaps our guest has the same affliction, while I'm sitting there on the side and they're introducing me and they're screwing up the introduction, but they're introduced, I'm totally nervous right there. But as soon as I take literally the first step, I get up and I make that first step, gone. I mean, gone.
Well, there's a big analogy there, right? So many people are afraid to take that first step, to hit record, to start something like a podcast. Yeah. And, our next guest it's to say that he's just a podcaster is absolutely not doing him justice, but I'm sure he would agree. His very first podcast, if he went back and listened to it, as opposed to the, I think 350th episode that he just did, I'm sure there is a great big difference between that first one, but he had to get started. He had to take that first step, right?
That's it. And there are times actually where when you're sitting and getting introduced, you can't even remember. You have no idea what you're going to say. Right. I mean, it's just like I'm clueless. You're looking at a blank slate. I'm like, what the heck? But as soon as you make that step, it just comes. By the way, that was an excellent segue. Let's bring the big dog on here because I want to hear what he has to say. Better than me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't wait. I can't wait for this. This is going to be just a really special episode, and I'm glad everyone has tuned in. Would you please welcome, let me, technical difficulties here, Dan. All right. He's back on. Let's add him on. Please welcome business consultant, technology startup coach, podcast producer, author of Selling with Confidence. And of course, you know him as the host of the #1 sales podcast in the universe, Sales Babble, Selling Secrets for Non-Sellers. Pat Helmers, welcome to Dan Jordan Live.
There you go. Pat Helmers, you got to put your arms in the air so we can capture the photo, and then we'll put it. There you go. Put arms in the air. There you go.
Yeah, boots in the air too. Boots in the air too.
Yes, boots in the air. You killed it. So look at that professional mic.
What if I was to fall over?
Yeah, that would have been even better.
This is live video. You never know.
Yeah, I would have been on the IR list for next week. Yep.
Well, that's excellent. So let me tell you how I met Pat Helmers. And for my cold callers out there and all the people that follow me as far as sales is concerned, I picked up the darn phone and I called him. We just happen to have wind up on the same list with podcasts, and where I was somewhere on the list, this guy was number one. This guy was number one on the list. Do you have that, Stoner?
I think I do.
Okay, well,
do. Let's well, look at this. Look at what we have here. We can close that. Let's see here. Best podcast for sales. Let's scroll down. Let's find number one. Oh, look at that.
Look at that. Number
Sales
one.
Babble. Look at that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm number one. But I'm certainly on this list, number one, aren't I?
Well, if you go down to the list here and you look at what number 11 is, if you
look
squint,
at that. See?
So Pat, if you squint your eyes right now,
I'm seeing it.
You can see number one there.
Yes, indeed.
Right? I mean, it's you could. It
So
almost
we're the
feels
same.
like.
So here's what I did. I saw that and I say, you know what? Let me pick up the phone and call them. And a lot of times people are scared to call the people at top. Now you're in sales, and your podcast obviously is all about sales. What's your suggestion about people to get, when they're hunting for new business? How do you, with all your experience, what's the best way to approach them?
It all kind of depends, I think, in the situation. But I'm a big fan of just picking up the phone and calling them. It's the fastest way of doing it. You're a big fan of LinkedIn, right, Dan?
Yeah, well, LinkedIn seems to be the group that I get the most business from. It seems to be the group that I get the most engagement from.
And there's a lot to be said about reaching out to someone on LinkedIn and connecting with them and doing that kind of warm invite, and then then once you start a conversation with them, convert that into a phone call. But sometimes busy C-levels, they never log into LinkedIn, and they hardly ever log in, and they might not see it for weeks. So it's easier just to pick up the phone and say, and ask a question.
That's right. And I think that's what I did. And actually, I started the conversation, as I do most conversations. I probably sang your praises a little bit. I probably took to the fact that you were number one on that thing. I was just really impressed. And I'm so surprised that you even picked up the phone. By the way, that's a great thing to say. I'm so surprised that you even picked up the phone.
It's not a lie. It actually is surprising when people pick up the phone.
That's right. And so how do you, now you have, not only do you have awesome guests on your phone, on your show,
yeah.
But your SEO, like the titles of your podcasts are really good.
Yes.
It's like how to earn $1 million in sales.
Yes. You're right.
You
right.
know?
Yeah. I think SEO is really important because you have to make a decision. You have to have a conscious idea in your head that people aren't going to go to your website, but they might go to one of your blog posts, which are show notes for a podcast. And if you SEO them right, like, top 3 things that, what's the one question you should always ask, with Dan Jordan, right?
That's right. Oh yeah.
Because people will type stuff like that in. And there's things that you can do on a web page that Google will like. I'm no SEO expert, but I know enough to be dangerous.
Well, so how did your podcast is, you deal with experts that come on your show. Have you used your podcast to grow your, well, actually, what are you doing right now? And are you using the podcast? Is that just the vehicle that's getting you to there?
Well, podcasts help grow your brand. They help grow your authority. They show that you're an influencer. When you have all these kinds of things, it can't help but build trust in people. And trust is probably the biggest issue that people have in purchasing something from you or buying something from you or taking your advice. So podcasting is a great way to boost your brand. And that's certainly what it's done for me. People see me as an expert, even though I'm talking to other experts. People see me as somebody affable and somebody authentic and somebody, a guy they like to hang around and have a cup of coffee or, go out for a beer with. So that's what podcasts do for me. And I've been doing it for quite some time.
How long have you been doing it?
Yeah.
6 years. It'll be 7 in March.
Yeah, it's just incredible to me. And I think you're at episode 350, 340-ish?
It's a lot.
It's something like that when I looked at it. And I imagine that, like, of course, having that kind of longevity in the podcast industry is something you can rely on, but you can't. Your content has to continue to be better and raise the bar. So, as you know, when I listen to a number of like recent episodes, you're covering current stuff. The content is getting better. Are you always looking to level up in terms of what you're talking about? And maybe if someone that is maybe just has 10 episodes, maybe they just started, or maybe they've done it for 3 months and they're not seeing the download numbers. They're not seeing, the Apple charts, and they're not seeing that. I know you work a lot with a podcast network and working with some people that may be just starting. What do you tell somebody that you've learned over the course of 6 years early on that you could sort of give back to some newer podcasters?
I think probably the biggest piece of advice I would give people new to podcasting is to really listen to what your guests are saying. Ask, open-ended questions, and as they answer, ask questions still within that context. What you're trying to pull out of people and what people want to hear are stories. How did you get in that bind? Why did you think that was a challenge? What did that feel like? How did you come to the idea that maybe there's a way out? How did you find the courage to then execute, and take action? And what was it like overcoming, that challenge? And people want to hear those stories. And if you could ask people those stories and get them to talk about them, what I like about my podcast is, for the most part, I don't interrupt people. I let them talk. And it's not an opportunity to show myself off. I got plenty of time to do that on my podcast. I got in the intro, I could talk if I want. On the outro, I could talk a lot. I don't want to be somebody who's over talking people all the time. As you see in talk radio, happens all the time. Because people got these big egos and stuff like that. For new podcasters, I would say, listen. Listen.
Yeah, I'm almost afraid to talk now, Stone. I mean, he's killing me.
Yeah, take his advice, Dan.
Who is your favorite guest and why?
Oh my goodness. I've had some really great guests. I have a buddy of mine who is an expert at automated email systems. His name's Neil Christensen. I've had him on the podcast like 10 times. He's the only person I've had. I have him on every year around the week before Christmas, and we talk about the top 10 tools of sales and marketing. And we drink beer. Why is he so good? We have a lot of chemistry and talk, and it's conversation flows really easy. That's a really good thing to do. I've had some great people. Jeffrey Moore, who invented who was the author of Crossing the Chasm. He was great to have on the podcast. He's somebody I thought I'd never meet. Jeff Gitmer, I've had on the podcast. Somebody I thought I'd never ever meet. Had a great time. We laughed the entire time. Some people you have chemistry with, and some people you don't.
And that's what makes a good guest, to get that chemistry. Because there are a lot of people that are trying to brand themselves by going on other people's podcasts. Mm-hmm. What would you say to that type of person? They don't have a podcast yet, but they want to get on big name podcasts like yours. What are you looking for?
Yeah, I think it's like any other sale, Dan. What does the host of that podcast, what do they want? What are the goals of their podcast? What are they looking for in guests? What's the message they want to get across to their audience? What's that brand thing that they're trying to promote? If you can reach out to them and say something like, just like what you did, you call them on the phone, you go, I was listening to your podcast. I think I can add a lot to your audience because it seems to me you're about this. I've done something like that. I have some interesting stories to share. Would you be open to maybe having a conversation to see if I could be a guest?
I think that's key. And I love the listen aspect. I think there's a lot of people that think they can start a podcast and have it be an interview-based podcast. And they've really have not honed their skill as an interviewer like you have. I mean, no one's probably going to be a Howard Stern or Joe Rogan, especially not right away, right? But the whole listening aspect of what you do, it's like, even though it's called Sales Babble and you're the host, right? When your guest comes on, they're the star, right? And you're listening, and whatever they're sharing with your audience, you're basically, giving back to those people. And I love that whole thing. And I also love the aspect of you guys talking about cold calling here, right? And we've got people that are chiming in. We've got Anna Scheller from USA Biz Party on LinkedIn, and she's talking a lot about how so many folks are afraid of calling, and she gets nervous too, and that stories are central to podcasting and sales. So, and I know, Dan is like this, world-class cold caller, and he, if he doesn't. Listen, Pat, I've called him. I can't call him before 8 a.m. If I call him before 8 a.m., he's got to get me out the phone. He's, listen, I got 24 more dials. I got to do it. I got 24, so do you think, and you've interviewed a lot of classic, amazing cold callers on your podcast. Do you think people just need to get those reps in? Like, what are some of the great stories you've heard on your podcasts specifically about cold calling that you might be able to share?
This kind of goes back to the question that you asked, Chris, earlier, like, who are some of the great guests I've had? I had Stephen Schiffman on the podcast twice. He wrote the book on cold calling, in my opinion, because when I first started in sales, that's the book I bought. I bought his book. And he was really, really great on the podcast. And I think what I took away from that is the idea that if you have a clear script in mind, what you want to say, and you're constantly polishing it, you can actually, when you're cold calling, you can actually kind of get yourself into a zone. It's just like sports. When I'm in the cold calling space, and I was very recently, just two months ago, I was working for a client, and I was trying to show them how to do this. So I actually buckled down and cold called hard for like 4 weeks. It was fun. I had everything organized. I had HubSpot up here. I had my script right here in a note, and I was constantly tweaking it and changing it, and I had my book over here for notes, and I was marking off how many I did, just like what Dan says. I try to get 20, 25 in, which is about the best you can do in the B2B kind of space. Because you got to take notes and put it in and things like that. So
with all that.
Yeah. So it takes, it's pretty fun to do. What's cool about it too is that, you wake up in the morning, you get your cup of coffee, you sit down, and you just go right to work. Because you're just like, oh, look, I'm supposed to call this person. Oh, I'm supposed to call this person. Oh, I've not called this person. I said, oh, we got a new lead. And you just kind of there's a flow to it that I find really, really interesting.
It's the most refreshing part of sales for me, because you can't lose a sale you don't have. And right now you don't have it. And so it's the only time that there's no pressure on you. No one's expecting anything from you. You're calling strangers and you're trying to get something, going on. If they say no, see you later, potato, and you move on.
In fact, I expect everybody I call not to buy. I expect everybody not to be a customer. I have no expectations this is going to work. My only expectations and the goal I have in every call is like, let's just see if they're a fit. They're probably not a fit, but let's just ask. And every so often, they are a fit. So you're like, woohoo, that's awesome, right? You're high-fiving. And if they're not, then the conversation sometimes goes to, I could see you're not a fit, but hey, Chris, do you know anybody who might be a good fit? And try to get a referral.
Well, my pitch for years when I was a stockbroker was, hey, this is Dan. I'm with a company here in town. Real quickly, I was calling to see if you might be interested in the 9% paying Fort Howard bond. Fort Howard makes toilet paper. It was a big bond. I did that for 5 years. I didn't sell one bond. Everybody said no. Everybody said something. I didn't care. My goal was the next question, because as soon as they responded to me, now we're in a conversation. And so they'd say no, or they'd say whatever, that I hate you, or whatever they'd say to me. I'd say, great. Well, let me ask you this. When you do invest, what's been successful for you in the past?
Oh,
And if they engaged with question number 2, I had a chance. But I was searching for the no on the first one. Half the time I had no bonds to sell. It didn't matter. I knew they were going to say no.
but think of all the pressure that takes off of you.
Yeah.
You're just doing it mechanically,
Oh yeah. You're talking to your friends and you're doing all sorts of stuff.
Well, here's another way too. If you have a mindset that everybody you meet's your cousin, you're much more open to them. You're more affable with them.
My computer's going to shut down. Kibitz amongst yourself. I have to plug it in.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Plug in the power. That we
This
might
is
need
a
that for a live
professional.
stream.
This is a professionally run show.
This is how we do it. I can only do so much, Pat. I can't plug in his computer. But you know what? Everyone talks about virtual selling and virtual this, and right now we're virtually speaking to each other, which is amazing technology. But I think a lot of people forget that the phone is a virtual device.
Yeah.
That you are speaking to someone. It's a completely different energy. And I get inspired by people like Dan, yourself, and others that, they're encouraging it and they're taking advantage of it. Where everyone's saying these stupid phrases like cold calling is dead. Well, zig when everyone is zagging, and you've got a whole group, a whole generation of people that don't have that skill, that will need that skill because they haven't really been trained. And I know you guys, deal with sales teams and sales directors of sales and managers, and they're like, these people can't use the phone. Like, they don't know how to do it. They always want to text me, or they always want to message me, or they always want to get it on Slack, or it's just like, at some point you've got to be able to talk on the phone, especially like you said, Pat, C-level executives, they're not going to be touching Slack,
No.
But you call them, you're differentiating yourself, right?
Although I have to admit, times have changed. I was volunteering for somebody running for office. We just recently had an election, as you know, and I was doing cold calling for them too. And a big part of what they had integrated into the cold calling was texting.
Mm-hmm.
Did he go?
I think we're breaking up here a
Okay.
little bit, but
he's in the woods in the southern hemisphere right now, and so these type of things happen. But when if he's calling people and texting, listen, it's not about the texting or the cold calling or the emailing or all this. The thing that people are not skilled with right now that they need to work with is how just to relate to strangers, how to start that conversation with strangers. And it's what you say, it's your tonality, it's the way you feel about it. And you can create that tone in an email just as easily as you can, in a text and over the phone. It's important to get it right. That's why the 7 magic words are so important. So you're getting back to the podcast. So somebody wants to start a podcast, and you talked about good interviews. You don't do your shows live, do you?
No.
Okay. So have you ever had a bad interview? Like one that you so bad that you just like, listen, I'm not even going to put this one up.
Yes, many.
And why? What makes a podcast unacceptable for you?
If the person is really pitching something, if they're rude, if they're mostly that. Sometimes if I feel like they're pitching something and they're not really creating value for my audience, that's probably the better measure of it. If there's no value for my audience, I won't publish it. Now I've struggled with some episodes. I'm like, I really want to make this person happy. I know they went to the trouble to interviewing of showing up for the interview. But I just don't think so kind of what I do is I'll go, I'll punt on this one. I'll just leave it sit there for a few weeks and think about it. And then I might go back and listen to it and I'll go, yeah, maybe I'll think about it. Next thing you know, 6 months has gone by or years gone by. It never gets published. And they never ask. So
So you're not gonna let a podcast ruin your brand.
No, because I have a deep commitment with my audience. Sales Babble, the subtext is selling secrets for non-sellers. I created the podcast with the idea that there's people out there who have a deep passion about something, but they don't have a deep passion about selling, about persuading. But they understand that if they really want to promote this thing that means something to them, that's really important to them, that they're going to have to get better at persuading. And that's why I started Sales Babble, because I believe that anybody with an attitude of like, I'm here to help you, and I'm here to ask, I'm here to listen to see if I can help you, that they can be somewhat successful at selling. Good enough. So that's the whole point of the podcast.
So give me an example of a person like that. You say you had an intimate relationship with you may have not used the word intimate, with your listeners. Have you developed relationships with your listeners that have gone to business and friendships and all that?
Absolutely.
And do you have an example of one?
I have a client right now who I've had for a couple of years. She's a startup. And a technology startup. And a lot of engineers are, the last thing they think of themselves as being gregarious and outgoing and backslapping and what we stereotypically think great salespeople are. When in reality, great salespeople are people who may not be overly extroverted, that are actually somewhat introverted. And I was able to share with her the ability for her to become really good at selling. And she became extremely well at selling. So good that she's on the path of now creating her own startup. So I work with a lot of technology startups, because that's where my background is. My degrees are actually in computer science, certainly not media, certainly not advertising, not marketing and all that kind of stuff. Although I have the marketing agency, but that's where I come from. And that's an example of an ideal listener for Sales Babble is, an engineer who believes in something, some tech, they want to get it out to the world, and they got to get better at selling. So
that's awesome. I think it's so important for podcasters. A lot of businesses, the same applies too. Is they use the word avatar. Who is your ideal listener? Who is who you're talking to? What does that person look like? How old are they? What types of businesses are they in? What magazines are they reading? Where are they going online? Like, you have that vision for that person who you're speaking to, and once you have that vision, that's where the content rolls, man. You know the guests that you're going to be able to target, because they're going to speak to that person. They're going to give to that person and that avatar. And that's exactly what, whenever I talk to new podcasters, that's exactly what I tell them. I was like, if you don't know who you're talking to, you're never going to have a great podcast. You have to know who exactly you're talking. Imagine always talking into a microphone when you go, on stage, and never being able to see your audience ever, and not know who it is or have any idea who they are. It just doesn't make sense. So I love that whole target that particular avatar and speak to them.
So that opens up a thing, Chris, where what I advise people to do is to do some market research. Mm-hmm. And markets research is a great way. It's actually, to a certain degree, a ruse of doing a cold call. So you call people up and you say, hey, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. I want to make sure that I add value. I'm trying to better understand my audience. Would it be okay if I could ask you 5 or 6 questions? It'll only take a couple minutes, I promise. And
that's great. Good. That's great.
I hope people are writing this down. Or
I'm working with a client right now that they want to find out why their competitors have done a better job than they did in selling their franchise to more people last year. And so I'm actually making calls to their competitors, these franchise people. I just did individual owners and say, hey, I wonder if you can help me. I'm looking into getting into this business. Would it be okay if I picked your brain for a little bit? You would not believe the information they give me. Numbers, how long it took them, their employees, how much they pay them, the whole shebang, just by asking. And to your point, as far as being a good interviewer, I ask one open-ended question and press mute and let the floodgates open.
They'll tell you everything. And the thing is you can use this, this idea of you can use this in sales, that if you call people up and say, I'm thinking about doing a startup, I'm thinking about starting a product or a service, not too sure if it's a good fit or not. It may be a dumb idea. Maybe it's a good idea. Could I ask you a few questions? And then you start asking them questions. And you tell them it's only going to take a few minutes, but you can tell they're excited. So next thing you know, you're talking for a half an hour. Invariably, they're going to go, well, as you figured this out, you should reach back out to me,
Yeah.
And now what you've just done is created a qualified lead.
And it works more often than you would think because you're feeding on their ego. You're basically interviewing them, and you don't interview idiots. You don't interview 3-year-olds. They don't know anything. So you're basically calling them smart. It's full circle. It's how you engage with people, by complimenting them.
Shout out to Pete Primo, who thinks that this is great. So he's getting a lot of. Pete Primo is in furniture sales. He's fantastic. He's got a show as well and a great book as well. So shout out to Pete. Anna's got a question. So you didn't start in sales. I think most people happen into sales and then love it. Do you find the same thing? Do you guys find it varying in terms of how do you fall into sales? You're assigned, all of a sudden it's like, oh, hi, I'm in sales. What do I do now? Or is it, I guess are sales people born? Maybe is a better question.
I think both, in my experience.
Okay.
I fell into sales for a good reason. I was doing product development for telecommunication software. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of great projects, building a lot of great systems that got canceled over and over again. And I was just mystified by that. I thought, why is it that this thing is not being bought? So I just started gravitating towards the front end, to the salespeople. And all of a sudden you come to realize we weren't building at all what they wanted. But as engineers, we didn't know any better. So eventually, actually what happened to me was I got laid off during the internet boom of 2001, 2002.
Oh, that was the .com bust.
The .com bust.
Yeah,
remember eToys was a hot.
Oh, yes.
They were very hot this time of year. Back in 2001 or 2.
Was that like Webkins? Remember the Webkins and that
yeah,
thing?
Yeah. Yeah, everybody had a MySpace account. Yeah. So anyway, so I got laid off, and I just very naturally I was at a trade show for education because my wife was president of the school board at the time, and I was just a guest, and I bumped into a guy who had this web app that he was selling to school districts, and I'm like, this is awesome. As a parent, I loved it. And I go, I think I could sell this. I don't know anything about sales. And I bought Schiffman's book. Yeah. And I bought a list that was in a paper book. And I just started going through there and I fell into it. But not all people are like that. My youngest son is a technology sales guy, and he did it mindfully. He made a conscious decision. I think I'd like to go into sales. He spent a lot of time with me, and he's killing it. So, yeah. So I think it's a great. I think it kind of depends.
Yeah, I think it's a great area of business if you like to meet and talk with people, and that's because it's really on the.
Isn't that being a human?
Well, yeah, it is. But I mean, there's a lot of people. To Pat's earlier point, are introverted, and so. They get nervous, and not everybody's the Deej, there's some people that, when they walk into a crowded room, they like to find a dark corner and maybe kind of ease into it and maybe be first before they're doing it. But I think,
I don't know. A lot of times when most women have babies, it's the women, the part that has the baby. So when a woman has a baby and they're all there and say, oh, it's a baby girl or a baby. It's never, oh, look, you're the parent of a proud baby salesman. I mean, there's not a born salesman. But
matter of speech, but yeah.
You've heard my story about people that get married. I mean, talking about the biggest sale of your life. and a lot of introverts get married. So if the goal is big enough, if the desire is there to get that thing at the end, you could turn yourself into anything you want in order to get that. My world, how I got into sales, as a kid in my neighborhood, everybody had to have a trade. That was it. It was like an immigrant neighborhood, and everybody owns some certain business. And so I was the first, get a trade. One day I'm watching this landscaper, and he was, he owned the landscaping firm, and there was a bunch of guys mowing the lawn. And I asked him for a job, and he said, yeah, you could do this. You can make $25, doing this yard and all that stuff. And then I said, is everybody here making $25? And he said, yeah, everybody's here making $25. And I'm thinking, well, how much are you making? He was getting paid, $300 for the thing, and he was paying the people, and say he wasn't working and he was earning $200. And I said, you could do that for 10. I said, what if I can get you a bunch more houses here? And he said, yeah, do that. And he goes, I'll give you the same money for each house, even without doing the work. I said, let me become a salesman. That's it. It's the cheapest way to own your own business without expending any money.
How old were you at the time?
I was 13. I know that specifically because when you're 13 and you're Jewish, you have something called a bar mitzvah. And so I had my bar mitzvah, and like the thing is that now you're a man. I mean, you're 13, you don't know what, but a man has to go out and get a job. And so I was thinking in terms of that when I was 13, and that's how it went.
I'd love to have heard your pitch.
The pitch is real easy. Mrs. Angle, would it be okay if I had these guys mow your lawn instead? I could earn some money if I do it. All right, go ahead. Because that's what
magic words weren't there, Dan.
Isn't it? When you were a kid, didn't your children sell, like popcorn and stuff for the Cub Scouts and that whole thing?
They did, and all my boys were Boy Scouts.
They were all Boy Scouts.
And two of them were Eagles.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it is now, but I mean, that's a big deal in my book. I mean,
it is. One works for Boy Scouts.
Does he? Is Boy Scouts still around?
Oh yeah.
Things have changed a little bit, but they're still around, and the Eagle Scout is a monstrous achievement. You've got to be proud of that. And
did he put it on his resume?
Oh yeah. Well, the one who's an Eagle Scout is he's in the Army. He's down in Guantanamo Bay right now. Wow. And the other one, he's a specialist, and the other one is a captain in the Army, and he's in Germany. I'm a pacifist. I'm not a military person. I have 3 kids in the military.
Oh, that's great. So how did that happen? Right there.
Well, Boy Scouts.
So let me dig into that. So you were supportive though of them doing that?
Oh yeah.
And supportive of everyone, in whatever they would choose to do.
Yeah, absolutely. We taught them to be adventurers. We traveled a lot. We camped a lot. We drove to both oceans. It's whatever they want. I'm very, very proud of them.
Well, that's exciting. Have they been on your show?
One has. The sales guy has. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. The captain in the Army. We actually did a show on him passing Ranger School, which, by the way, is not easy.
Wow.
And but we can't release it as long as he's in the Army.
Oh.
But I'm really glad we recorded it, because he's very he's really good at telling stories, and he has very wild language, very colorful language, and how he describes the whole process. And watching Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, that's what does that.
Well, so he's a real boy, become a real man who wants to be a hero.
He is a hero.
Yeah.
Been to Afghanistan, he's been all over everywhere.
And that's just terrific. I love that.
He's rough and tough, but inside he's really pretty sweet. He's got an awesome wife, beautiful, terrific wife, and 2 terrific dogs. Yeah. Guys, I could talk about my family all.
I was going to say, we should
probably stop.
No, we want to hear it because that's you
Fathers
talk
as
about
well.
relating to your customers or relating to people. There were three. I learned this early on. I think Michael Milken. Remember him?
Yeah.
The Bond guy, like the junk Bond guy.
Well, wasn't he convicted? He was convicted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You learn the best stuff from people who are convicted. But once he got out, he went there and started talking. He says, there's three things that you can always talk about to get somebody talking. He goes, their money, their job, and their children. Everybody likes talking about that. Ask them about that, and you're good to go.
I think you could put pets in there too. People love talking about their pets.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you said you mentioned the two dogs. I used to, a lot of people say that my dogs are my kids. Until they have kids, and then they're just dogs.
Dan, you may be angering people right now.
Wouldn't be the first time, Pat. Would not be the first time. So, Pat, we've talked a lot about sales babble, and rightfully so. It's a monster podcast, and for those that have that are watching this either on replay or live, absolutely go get the #1 sales podcast in the world, Sales Babble. You won't hear the Army interview, unfortunately, until he's out. But in any event, Pat, I wanted to talk about Habanero, like ABBA, the band, Habanero Media, because I know that's a lot of what you're doing right now. And so can you, it looks like we had a disconnect. Hopefully you're back.
I have Comcasting service.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So in case you
it's
missed
from
it,
Xfinity to beyond, right? It's and quite honestly, I went and rebooted my router just before this too, just in case that because I've been seeing this for the last couple of weeks. But I call them.
And don't worry. Having you jumpy like this is better than having Chris Stone perfectly in perfect view.
See, every show, Patrick. That's every show. Can you talk to us a little bit about Habanero Media and what your efforts are there? I know you're working not only on just Sales Babble, but you're working with a lot of other podcast brands within that network. I'd love to hear more about Habanero Media.
Well, in Habanero Media, we help businesses create B2B interview-based businesses, B2B interview-based podcasts to boost their brand, their authority, their influence, and trust. Podcast, to quote Seth Godin, podcasting's the new blogging, and it's a green field. It's a great way to really connect with an audience, and it's actually very intimate because unlike webinars like this or YouTube videos or a blog post or any number of social media posts, podcast is something that you can do and you can multitask. You can drive a car, you can go for a walk, you can do housekeeping, and you can listen. And when you listen to people, you really become close to them. You build relationships that you can't otherwise when you hear people's voices. People meet me, they think they know me, because they've been listening to me for a couple of years. So that's what we try to do. What we're doing with businesses is if we create a podcast, it creates an opportunity for them to showcase their clients. It also creates an opportunity for them to meet people they otherwise couldn't easily meet by having them as guests. And in both cases, that creates that creates business, either an upsell or a new thing. Podcasts are a great way to get references, to have assets that you can share with existing clients, with new clients. Like, oh, here's Dan Jordan. He's one of my clients. He's really, really happy with this. Here, listen to this episode. You can see what it's like. Or so that's what we do at Habanero Media. We help people. We do a couple things. For some people, they just want to get kicked off. We can do that. We can have the whole sounds. We design the whole soundscape of the show with the music and the intro, kind of how it's all laid out with some coaching on how to do the interviews. And or we can edit it every episode that they do, and I do that. In fact, I'm doing that this week with a couple podcasts. They like me there to hold their hand. They're very not technical, not technical people, and it's been really rewarding. It's been really fun, and it's fun learning about things I don't know anything about.
Yeah, that's really good. So so basically, somebody with an idea or just wants to grow their business can hire you, and they could worry about their content and themselves, and you'll take care of the rest. Yep.
And I got a team of people that help me with this. People do graphics design, people that do editing, people. I got a musician. If you want custom music.
Custom music. Chris Stone, do we have any custom music?
All we got to do is ask, baby.
Okay.
Sure. I'll pull out my kalimba, my theremin, and we'll have a new show intro in no time.
Well, that's awesome. So, and if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do so?
I'm all over. You can Google Pat Helmers and I'll pop to the top. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Podcast that I have is Sales Babble. See?
What does a guy have to do to get a Sales Babble cup in this place?
Oh, it's easy peasy.
Who's the guy I have to sleep with to get a Sales Babble cup?
No, it's easy peasy. I can send you one. It's a fun. Oh, yeah, there you go. There you go.
Hey, well, I will do that. I'll look on your website and do it. And I could tell everybody else who's watching this. And we have anybody you want to tell? Oh, at least Patrick Tinney is playing around with us.
Yeah. Shout out to Patrick Tinney. Him and Pete Primo decided that they're going to have a conversation on LinkedIn, on LinkedIn Live. So I'm glad we can connect you two. Why don't you guys go get a room? We're actually live right now,
they should be social distanced.
Yeah, right. Look at us connecting people. Everyone's having a conversation, which is great, but not great for a live show.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah. So Pat, I really loved how you made a differentiation between what is an audio podcast and what we're doing now, and what people are doing on YouTube and TikTok and shorts and all of these things where people are used to just kind of taking their thumb visually and also, with audio. And it's really just, you've got to grab, and we talked to a YouTuber just this week, you've got to grab, he said, with every 10 to 20 seconds, if you are not hitting somebody visually with something, you've lost them. But in podcasting, to your point, Dan, you used this word earlier, intimate. And so that's really what an audio podcast is, because like to your point, Pat, somebody's taking a walk, they're walking the dog, they're running. I listen to podcasts when I run, drive into work. You're actually putting that person in your head. It's very, people don't realize that, like to your point, when they meet you for the first time, they already know a ton about you. They feel like they've known you for years already. And I think as a salesperson, that's a huge advantage for your business to be able to have that out there doing that for you. And I think that's something that a lot of podcasters, they look at a show like we're doing right now and they call this a podcast. You can call it a podcast. You can call it whatever you want to call it. But what you're talking about is audio, and it's a different medium, and it should be treated differently for that kind of audience. I'm really glad that you highlighted.
Yeah, you're spot on, Chris.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, I appreciate it. And by the way, I could tell anybody who watches this, if you want to talk to Pat, pick up the darn phone. He answers. It's the craziest thing. Even such a big shot like him. So you can do that. And to your point, and in closing, in regards to this thing about whether you should get started, if you're thinking about getting started with a podcast, do it. It's one of those things. If when in doubt, attack. So if you're ever thinking, should I do it or should I not do it? Yes. Just do it, especially now when you have to make some different moves. And remember, with all these different social medias, all these different ways for you to get out right now, and many are free and some are close to free. Remember this in terms of sales. It's not who you know. It's who knows you. And if you can create a product like a podcast that creates an intimate relationship between you and the person listening, they know you. And that's the first part. They know, like, and trust you. You just got to get them to like you, and then the trust will just follow. You do that, and your success and your future in sales or whatever endeavor you're in will become sure. And assured that you will get where you want to go. Listen, you're the best. I'm the Deej. And as always, just go get them today, will you?